So what does groove have to do with ambient guitar and ambient music? Let's find out. Hey everybody, so this is my friend Jim Wall. You may have seen him here on the channel. We've done a couple of collaboration videos together. Most recently, we did a piece called Soul's Joy, which made it onto my album Dreams. If you haven't heard the album, I'll have a link here so you can check it out. Jim, as you think about the piece in particular that we did, Soul's Joy, together, we were kind of talking about groove and ambient music. So what were some of the things that struck you about that particular tune as we were playing together, actually doing the performance?
And yeah, this whole thing about groove and ambient music, if you would have asked me 2 years ago, I would have said, well, I have no idea how those two would connect together.
What is groove and ambient?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but when you and I did that piece a little while back, as a bass player sitting down to do an ambient guitar piece with you, I realized fairly quickly as we started experimenting with a couple of ideas that as a bass player, I had some responsibility here. Right. First of all, the frequency, you know, where I'm going to be, what do I need to do note-wise to help the music that we were doing go well. Right. But then also the other job of a bass player beyond melody and potentially harmony is the rhythm. It's how that instrument is going to interpret the piece rhythmically. Right. And it wasn't long into starting our piece as we sat down to work up a couple ideas to record. I thought, oh boy, I can't, as a bass player, in good conscience, just let the music drift away and get away from us time-wise. So what did you do to figure that out? Great question. So as I thought about that, I thought, okay, well, what is my primary responsibility rhythmically? And my primary responsibility, I felt, was hold the time down. Whatever time we start with, whatever beat we start with, to lock that in and hold it down. Which is kind of interesting that you would say that, given that, if you recall, I was using a looper. Yes. And so that first guitar part was actually a loop. Yes. And again, if you haven't heard the whole piece, I'll have a link to the video and all that good stuff so you can see what we did when we played it. Yeah. So how did that, so you're thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to hold down the time. So how did that play out, you know, as in the performance? The looper is going to render the music back to you in a certain set time. Of course. It's not randomly coming. So part of my job was to discern, okay, what's the best sort of tempo for the music? In other words, how fast or slow? And that looper spoke into that question as to, okay, what's going to fit well as the delay or the looping occurs? So again, job number one for me as a bass player there was discern the best tempo and lock in on it. Okay. Find it and lock it. Okay, cool. So you set it, lock it. So what did you end up playing? How did you decide to kind of implement that lock into the rhythm of the song? Yeah, great question. So at a certain point, once I had a feel for here's what the tempo should be, you might notice on the video itself, on the one shot, the one camera angle, I'm tapping my foot. Oh yeah? That is a very conscious thing. So it's not like we're sitting at a dance hall and we're trying to find our groove and get into it that way. The reason for me to tap my foot was it was a way to help me as the bass player to hold to that tempo. And so the easiest way is typically as a musician is just to tap your foot. And that's what enabled me to get in there and lock that down. It was a very conscious effort. Yeah, that makes sense. And it really holds down the core of the song. And actually, when I redid the mix for the album, I really focused on getting a tonality out of the bass track to really kind of emphasize that pulse. So, Jim, that brings me to another question that we kind of talked about earlier, and that is, what are some of your thoughts about how rhythm and pulse fits into ambient music in general, which in many cases we consider to be
pulseless. So again, I'm thinking of things like drone music and variants of ambient music that have the pulse is very buried in the context of that music. But how do you think that kind of fits in?
Yeah, so with music, generally speaking, you can put music out there that has no time signature at all. It can be very experimental, it can be very atmospheric. And, you know, as an artist, as a musician, that is your artistic judgment to do that. Many times, and when we talk about groove, what we're talking about here as a sort of minimum on groove is simply having a beat, keeping a beat somewhere.
Right.
Now that beat may not be obvious. There, you know, it might not be a drum there, might not be a down rhythmic hit on the bass or guitar. But even in music that seems to not have a tempo or a time signature to it, almost all music does. There are very, very good benefits to having some sense of a tempo to a song.
So yeah, and that brings up a thought for me too. So I'm gonna put a little bit of a song underneath here, and if you just kind of listen to it, maybe I'll cut to it also. I had people ask me, where is the beat in this piece? And it may not be apparent. And Jim, you don't know which piece I'm referring to right now, but it may not be apparent to you, but actually there's an internal pulse in my head.
Yes.
And there are other pieces that I've played here on the channel where people will say, it looks like you're playing to a beat, but I'm not hearing it. Yes. Because I'm either shaking my head or whatever in time, but there's actually an internal pulse that is kind of informing what's going on in the music. So what do you guys think? Where does rhythm and pulse fit into ambient guitar playing and maybe more generally ambient music? What's your experience? I would really be interested in hearing about it. So if you comment below, let me know. Let's share some ideas together about how this whole concept fits into the music that we make. And okay, here's the pitch. If you haven't done so, please subscribe to Chords of Orion. Join this awesome constellation of ambient guitarists. And I'll put a link around here to my music also if you're interested. And as always, I'll see you
on the next video.
Yeah.